Hey AJ, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on and joining me. Uh, for those people listening, can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so my name's AJ Murray, of course. I was a professional baseball player for about 3 years with the Minnesota Twins organization, the Milwaukee Brewers. Um, Before that, I went to school at Georgia Tech, so I played 4 years at Georgia Tech under head coach Danny Hall down there in Atlanta. And then I'm a Westfield, New Jersey native, so I believe my brother has been on this podcast before. So
Hmm.
that's really my sports background, and from there, right now as a professional, I work in the technology world for a public safety software company, doing a lot of project management work and consulting. But for the most part, that's my background um, professionally and both athletically.
Awesome. So, growing up, were you a multi-sport athlete?
Yes. So, always growing up, I loved playing football and baseball. My dad was a very good basketball player, so as a family, we always played basketball together. But always, probably up until freshman year of high school, I was playing three sports year round.
Okay. And so, at what point did you start to focus on baseball as sort of your primary sport?
It came around my freshman year of high school, actually. Um, I was always three sports right up until then, and then my last game as in freshman football, I actually broke my ankle on my last run of the year. So that automatically took out basketball from the mix in the winter. And then once my sophomore year hit, that's when I started to get a little bit more attention from college coaches. So the winter time was really dedicated to training, showcases, and getting ready for the spring.
So, at that point, did you drop football from your athletic career?
No, I kept football, much against some of my father's wishes, just to, obviously for the injury proponent of it. But I kept football. I played that all the way through senior year, varsity for Westfield. So I did not give up football.
Nice. Yeah, I played football in high school too. I loved it. It would
It's
have
the
been hard
best.
to give up at that point. It's the
I
best.
know
It's the
it.
best. It's a great team sport. It
It
really
really
is. I
is.
mean, as compared to baseball. Yeah. So tell me about that though. You said, around sophomore year you started to get more attention from college coaches. What did the recruiting process look like for you?
In the beginning, it was a lot of physical letters. Them sending
Hmm.
just correspondence to say if you want to come to our recruiting camp, see the campus, and get to know the coaching staff. So that was the initial round of starting to get recruited. Having a brother and sister, which I'm sure we'll get into throughout this discussion. But since they've been through the process, I had an idea of how it worked. But mainly it was letters, emails to the degree that the NCAA allowed the coaches to say, but mainly letters, camps, visits, and showcases where they would come by and watch, but not give too much information yet.
Okay. So at what point did you start to get offers, and what point did you commit to Tech?
I That was my junior year, so um, I was getting recruited and had a lot of interest prior to July of my junior year. I went to Perfect Game, the World Showcase there in baseball, um, and I believe it was the first week of July. I was playing down in East Cobb at that World Wood Bet, and um, I had been to Georgia Tech just with me and my dad walking around the campus. I knew them because my brother played them at Wake Forest, so I was very familiar with the school, and they offered me the first week of July. When I was at the World Wood Bet, they said if I would like to come on campus, see a tour, a formal tour, not me just walking around campus and poking
Mhm.
around. But after that, they sat me down and gave me an offer, and I committed on the same day they offered me. I had a gut feeling, which I wouldn't recommend everyone do, but I committed on the exact same day, and then that was my July of my junior year.
So at that point, did you have other offers?
I had hints of other, or it was the first week. I had a few other offers from different schools and was talking closely with Wake Forest, Maryland. I had been in discussions with like North Carolina and Virginia, but ultimately I went with my gut pretty early and saw the opportunity at Georgia Tech and ran with it.
That's really interesting. So what was it about Georgia Tech that sort of landed for you? Like, what was your like? How did you make that gut decision to say, "Hey, this is my first offer. I'm going to take it and go with it"?
It was definitely an in the moment decision. I spoke to my and I had in my mind, I knew the schools that were coming at me. I kind of knew the ballpark of where the offers were going to be as far as percentage wise, and I
Hmm.
knew each of the programs. I mean, my brother went to Wake Forest, so he had a very good understanding after playing with people, talking with them, um, about what each school was like. So even going into the decision, I had some background knowledge, but ultimately it felt, I really connected with the coaches. Um, and I read the media guide. I did some research, and I knew the players that came out of Georgia Tech and the caliber that they were. So to
Hmm.
me, that was where I was going, even if I didn't know it yet. Just of the caliber of the school, the athletics. So
Hmm.
once they offered me, I was like, all right, we're aligned there.
That's really interesting. But you're right. I mean, think about the players that came out of Georgia Tech before you, Nomar and Veritek, and
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many really great professional players that came out of the program. I mean, that's got to help in terms of the credibility, right? And
right.
the academics, like we talked about before, right? That combination, it would be pretty easy to sell somebody on it, I would think.
Exactly. It's a combination of all three. And yeah, for a lifestyle, like Atlanta is a great and growing city, so that played into factor. And I wanted to go away for school and get somewhere different. But all three of those together made a great combination, and overall great experience at Georgia Tech.
Okay. So, so after you committed, right? Obviously, you're still in high school and you still have to play baseball, right? Like, what did that look like after you committed? Like, did that change the way you approach things?
Never, I will admit, it was kind of a lift off my shoulders, like having been committed and going through that,
Hmm.
because it is a very long process, and there's a lot of unknowns while you're going through it. Where you're going
Hmm.
to end up or what offers going to come in, if any are going to come in. So it was a big weight lifted. And then from there, from a or my preparation, nothing really changed.
Hmm.
Playing the game was a little bit lighter, but for the most part, I went about business the exact same way. Um, Maybe with a little bit more confidence too, because I think every baseball player, especially who plays summer baseball, who's trying to get recruited, there is a lot of pressure that you put, on yourself to get to that level. And as a competitor, naturally, you're going to feel that time and time again. But even after committing, I always felt the desire to push forward and continue to progress, even though one goal was already
Yeah.
accomplished.
Yeah. No, it comes up a lot, when I talk to high school kids that I work with or people on the podcast, it's just the idea of like now, especially there's so much competition, there's so much
Hmm.
um pressure, to get committed, to
Right,
get an offer. And if you're uncommitted and you don't have offers coming your way, I think a lot of kids, it weighs on them really, really heavily. So in
right.
your case, like, would you say the pressure was sort of more like just general, or like did you feel it when you were actually on the field? Like, did you ever catch yourself be like, "Oh, I have to do this or perform this way or else"?
It was a combination. I had pressure on myself, and pressure is a loaded word. I feel like
Sure it
sometimes,
is.
it was just a big goal, and I put a lot of hard work, and
Okay.
every player goes through that. So you want to hit that goal, and you want to get to the best school or get the best offer, or
Hmm.
um, just be able, I think, in general, to prolong your career
Hmm.
on
Right.
the field. It's hard not to play, especially um, when you're in the field and see everyone behind you at the big tournaments, like the perfect game showcases.
Hmm.
Like what schools are there. You can see the hats, you can see the scouts. So naturally, you will look up and be like, look at
Sure.
all this opportunity. So you really have to prepare yourself and get used to playing in those situations, because realistically, when you go to these schools, if you get the unique opportunity to play at a big Division I school, or no matter what, there's always going to be someone watching you. Um, so it's a big testing ground, but there is pressure involved, of course. But luckily for me, being a catcher, most of that was behind me, so I could focus completely out on the field.
Yeah. Absolutely, right? You're in the game, so it's really hard to get distracted because you have to be on top of your game, especially when you're catching guys who are, throwing 90 plus miles an hour. It's really
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
if you lose your focus of attention, you're going to be in trouble.
Right, right. And you play your best when you're in the game too. Like that's when your best performance is going to come. If you're thinking about who's in the stands, what they're thinking, what
Hmm.
schools, you're not going to perform as well anyways.
Yeah, I mean that's something I talk to athletes about all the time. In terms of what they can and can't control.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that takes practice for some people. I think that there's just a natural inclination to sort of think about all the stuff that's surrounding them versus just saying,
Definitely.
"Hey, let me just focus on one pitch at a time or one at bat at a time, and not get caught up in all this other stuff because it's always going to be there. I can't get rid of it, so why
Mhm.
focus on it?" But so I think I probably knew that you were a catcher, but did you transition from behind the plate in college?
I did. So I caught all through high school. My freshman year, I did play the outfield a little bit for Westfield, but going into college, my freshman year, I was a catcher. But we did have, I believe, a year ahead of me, a very good. He was a third round pick, All American catcher. So I did transfer over to first base. I played a little bit of the outfield, DH. So really, anywhere I could get in the lineup, knowing that we had a solid backstop already. Um,
Hmm.
so I went from catching in college or in high school to basically just trying to find a spot in the field to play my first year of college and even throughout college.
So that's a good segue, right? So I mean, the theme of this podcast, the point is to kind of talk about that transition specifically, right? So obviously, there's a lot going on that first year. You're leaving high school, you're leaving home, you're
Hmm.
going to college, right? Just as a student, and then obviously you're a big time athlete. Then there's this whole element of like now you're switching positions, which I'm sure didn't help. I mean, can you just talk about like in general what that transition was like to go from Westfield to Tech?
Yeah, it's a big transition for everyone. And when you're 17, 18, you don't really know. You're in the moment, so a lot's happening around you. You don't really think
Hmm.
about all these things until you get to the age you are now, like 10 years later. But moving from Westfield to high or from Westfield to Georgia Tech, I mean, it was a big transition. Showing up on campus, having that first meeting in the locker room. Um, you're everyone's used to being the best player, one of the best players on your high school team, and you get to college, no matter what college you go to, everyone was probably the best player on their high school team in their state. So the room is filled with you can call it teammates and competition because it is very competitive once you get there.
Hmm.
um, on top of that, you're leaving home for the first time. Schoolwork is a lot different. Like your daily life is now, instead of being regimented schedule of 9 periods a day that we had in Westfield, to different class structures. You have to get to class yourself, find your way around, and also live away from home. So it's a lot of changes all at once. All very exciting. Of course, it's the best time of life, but it was a big transition because I went from, AJ Murray, who was, going to hit third in Westfield's lineup and catch every game and had that like security, and to, back to competing for a position on a team that, was established, was, a big time ACC program, um, and find your way and really almost not scrap in a way, but get yourself, noticed and in the lineup again. So it's a very different dynamic from high school being one person to transitioning to college and kind of earning your stars again.
Yeah. What was it like for you? Like, if you think back to that year when you were sort of in that underdog role now, which was completely foreign at that point, I would imagine. Like, what was it like to kind of adapt to that for you?
It was it was a big growth period for me, honestly, because I think I had so much security um, in high school being this player, and like I knew performance was there. Like my brother was a 560 height hitter in high school. So that was like my ceiling. I had to get somewhere to there. I hit 540. So like failure, and like I was above the failure point at that point, which is an interesting thing in baseball. But with New Jersey baseball, we have so many great players. I know like one great player that I played against in college was Mark Zagunis, and he hit like 650 in high school, which is a ridiculous average. So transitioning over to Tech, um, the biggest transition was getting my mindset in place, where now we're facing really good pitchers. They have a lot of good, obviously velocity, breaking stuff. Um, so the mental aspect of the game and being able to overcome like all the challenges of learning a new system, learning the new process of college baseball, of the student lifestyle, and being
Mhm.
able to still perform on the field.
Yeah. So on the mental side of it, I'm just curious. Like, this is, I mean, obviously, sports psychology and mental skills training has sort of evolved in the last 10 years and is very, very prevalent at every level now, quite frankly. I mean, professionally, for sure, you probably have
Yeah,
some exposure to it in the Twin system and the Brewer system at some level. In college, was that a thing? Like, when you were in college, did you guys have any sort of mental skills training?
it did. We had Georgia Tech was great at this. They had what we call the Total Person program. So it was a conference for all the student athletes to come in, no matter what sport you were, led by a Georgia Tech alumni. And that was where you went there, you did your personality test, you learned more about like your own traits, your work style, both, of course, for sports performance, but also for academics and hopefully a career one day. So that combined together in this total person program. And then we had, you know, sports performance coaches and psychologists come in, and we would do workshops. But from there, it was really once you got that education, the implementation, the execution was really, it had to be personal. It always is.
Yeah.
But we did have the resources in place to start moving that around.
That's awesome. So I know you told me this that your freshman year you had 12 at bats, right?
Hmm.
And interesting enough, I saw your brother this week and we were talking about that. And he was telling me that he was like sort of encouraging you or at least brought up the idea of get transferring out, but you decided to stay. Can
Yeah,
you talk about that? I think that's really interesting.
yeah, yeah. It was. I actually didn't know if I was going to talk about it today. It came up on my mind, like what we're going to talk about. Because my freshman year was very different for me because I did have 12 at bats. I wasn't getting a lot of playing time. Those 12 at bats, I think people who have been through college baseball, especially as a freshman, they're at bats at the end of the game typically. You warmed up 3 or 4 hours ago, so they're not like you're not in the game getting true at bats. But at the end of the season, I was set to go to Harrisonburg and play in the Valley Baseball League for summer ball. And my brother, my dad, of course, had a great relationship with the Wake Forest coach, and there was an opportunity if I wanted to transfer out. Um, but me, I really loved my team at Georgia Tech. Um, I personally did not feel like I needed more than those 12. I didn't play up to more than 12 at bats. I think there were great players in front of me. I knew my performance and how I worked over the fall, how it transferred into the spring, and I did get some opportunities early to start a few games as a freshman. But at the end of the year, I felt confident that those 12 at bats were what I should have gotten. Um, I wish I got a little bit more, but it didn't warrant taking away the opportunity of the next 3 years ahead to build and to grow and to really fight to get into the lineup. So it was um, taking like a safe decision to try and go somewhere else. That my brother and I, or my brother, my father and I were talking about. But I knew like Georgia Tech was the place for me, and I was
Yeah.
hungry to like fight back to get into the lineup.
I personally, I love that, and I've talked about this with college athletes, freshmen who have had a rough freshman year, and I always sort of encourage them to bring it back to what's the point here, right? If you want to play professionally, right, and if you're in the ACC, there's at least a chance that that's a reality in the future,
Right.
right? It happened for your brother, it happened for you, right? There are a lot of guys who come out of a great league. So that first year, yes, it's disappointing, I would imagine, but at the same
Hmm.
time, like you still have multiple years to grow and develop to the point where if the goal is to play professionally, you've got time to get there,
You
right?
do.
You just don't have to up and move right away. And I think it's admirable because I think now with the transfer portal, with the way things are in every sport, people are they're just bouncing around. What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
I mean, as you can tell, my decision was to stay. So
Right?
I don't think it's a great decision.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't recommend it whatsoever, just because this game is such a process, and if you don't understand that process, no matter if it's working to get into starting lineup, um, working on a new skill to get better. You can't just jump to like a better situation because it feels like the right move at the time. Yeah, so I think most young players are looking for like where can I play now, and they lose kind of why they're playing the game in the first place. Like it really isn't about where you are, who you're playing for, um, and I think you can get lost in that whole world. Whereas like embracing the challenge of like fighting to get a spot, working hard, and like really challenging yourself to like think in new ways. So I would encourage people if you're in a tough situation where you don't think you're getting enough playing time, stick it out, fight for a new role, and work your way back in the lineup.
I, I think I, I think the word you used a couple of times, and maybe you just said it there, but you said it before for sure, is opportunity. And I think as somebody who played high school baseball for multiple years as a starter, and then I didn't go on to play in college, like
Mhm.
I look at people like you and I go like I would have killed to just put a uniform on and stand in the
Yeah.
dugout, right? And I think people lose perspective about, like you said, why they play. Like, do you really love baseball so much that it doesn't matter, right? Obviously,
Mhm.
everybody wants to perform and contribute. I mean, we all feel that way if you're a competitor, but at the
Of
same
course.
time, it's like, well, you have this chance, like a lot of people don't get. And
Mhm.
so I think there is this element of like thinking too much about self and like what's in it for me versus like, hey, what am I getting out of this? And like, what's the bigger picture here?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great point, and you can only learn that through going through. I think everything's an opportunity. It's a great opportunity to play for your high school team. Moving into college and athletically, like, your high school team is truly like really your last team that you'll play for. In a weird, if I know it's a podcast, but my fingers moving in quotation marks.
Air quotes.
Uh, yeah, and air quotes. It's a weird way to put it
Yeah.
because you're still on teams, but in college, everyone's from different places. You're not trying out particularly, but you're fighting to get a spot, and it's a different um, organization. And then once you get to professional, like it's your job. It's an opportunity. It's the best opportunity in the world, but it's very much like you're fighting each day to like keep your
Right.
position to progress up, and all of which is an opportunity at your hands. I think that's the best word to use.
Yeah. So talk to me about freshman year ends. You kind of get past the decision to stay. You're going to stay put. Like, tell me about what happened from the end of that year until your sophomore year. Like, what did that look like? That
Yeah,
jump to the next year.
it was probably like the biggest growth stage that I had in college, that freshman year, into sophomore, mainly because I had to look back and be like, hey, I had 12 at bats. This is not like I wanted to come in here, start as a freshman. I had big goals. Like, what did I do wrong? Like, how can I get better? And what do I need to work on, both physically on the field, skill wise, and mentally, of course, because you need all three things working in unison. And when I look back on my freshman year, I took like an honest look. At the time, I was 6'1", maybe 230, 235 pounds. So I was big, um, in decent shape, strong, but I did not feel very athletic and mobile behind the plate. My swing didn't feel as sharp, as whippy as it did in the past. So I felt like I had to get in better physical shape, like lose weight, um, like still keep strength, but be flexible, be mobile in a way that I could really maximize what we work on, because Georgia Tech at the time, and still does, have a very great strength and conditioning program. So we're all strong dudes working. Um, but it made me realize like I need to get in better physical shape and hopefully affect my performance. And then preparation wise, going into games, I need to get back to like some of my grassroots, getting to the field early, taking extra batting practice, focusing more on getting ready for the actual game. Now that in summer ball, I was playing every day. I was back to playing every day. It was a great opportunity to get in a routine, catch, like learn the game, um, and really segue into the fall and compete for starting position.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really, and listen, at that point, you're still only probably 19 years old. That's a pretty mature point of view because I think that it would have really been easy for you to lose motivation, right? After that year, first year where you're like, oh, like I'm not getting a chance, or like I'm not as good as I thought I was, right? Instead, you kind of leaned into it, so to speak, and
Mhm.
you said, okay, this is what I need to get better at. And I think that that's what it's all about. I think that's really, really cool. So just kind of talk to me about the progression from sophomore year to the point that you sort of finished up there. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to get into too much detail, but what did the rest of your career look like? What was the trajectory into the point that you went on to play pro ball?
Yeah, it shot up after that, honestly. That transition point was the culmination point of college. I got in really great shape. I really found a swing that I was comfortable with. And my fall just exploded. Like physically, I got very strong. I was in great shape, but also on the field, I felt very confident. I had a good summer playing. They moved me over to first base. So after that, my sophomore year, I played all 64 games at first base, hit around fifth or sixth in the lineup, and ultimately had like a very good like comeback year to establish myself in the lineup. But overall, otherwise, like our team was excellent. Kind of started to take on more of a leadership role at the end of the sophomore year, just because anytime you transition out, you have your juniors and your seniors getting training or leaving, and moving into my junior year, I became much more of a utility. Getting the lineup type player. I DH'd. I played first base. I started catching a little bit more. Um, and then I think that was really where more of the skills, the soft skills of being a leader, working with the day to day of managing, the younger guys coming up, mentoring them, but also like working to, win an ACC championship, get to the regionals, get to the College World Series. Then my senior year, they put me back behind the plate for about, um, I think I caught 20 games. And the difference between my senior year and the first two, which got me to pro ball, was that my sophomore, my junior year, and my MO in high school was I was a power hitter. Like I hit for home runs, I hit for doubles. I was a run producing hitter. And my sophomore and my junior year, I was putting up good numbers, but my power numbers weren't quite there where the scouts were looking to give me a professional opportunity. Um, and luckily at the time at Georgia Tech, we really did a lot of work at maximizing my swing and really getting the ball in the air to drive the ball. And openly open that opportunity to play professionally. So my senior year was my best year. I hit about 280 with 15 home runs, and I was catching again. So that really brought my draft value up. So I attribute that a lot to like Georgia Tech giving me that chance to go back behind the plate, just because now it's turned into catcher university. Like there's a ton of great catchers coming out, but that catapulted me into pro ball and establish myself as someone who can still catch and has a lot of games left under the knees, but also can put up the power numbers that professional organizations are looking for.
So where is that, or not where? I mean, they're coming from the scouts, but how are you getting that feedback? And this is just me being curious, like from the scouts, right, or from the professional teams are saying like, hey, you need to be doing more of this. Are you getting direct feedback, or is that just sort of like intuition, like, hey, I need to be generating more power, or like, what does that look like to get that feedback?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it wasn't direct feedback whatsoever. It's mainly the people I had above me and around me. One in
Gotcha.
my family, like my brother, is by far, I think he could be the commissioner of Major League Baseball with how knowledgeable and how much he does now. So I put that out there for him. And my father, of course, got drafted and played and understood the game. And then all around me, like Georgia Tech, there's professional players coming back and using our facilities. So the conversations are flowing all around. So I had a lot of guidance coming in. Not that it gave me extra pressure, but it helped everyone align to like get me to a certain point of where my value was and where the opportunity was going to come. So that's
Yeah. Was
where a lot of
Oh,
the
go ahead.
conversations were based around.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Was I'm just curious, was launch angle a thing then?
It was, yeah. I went through the area. I think that's the most fascinating thing to track, like the swing progressions. I haven't been doing too many lessons or been around the cage too much, but launch angle was a thing. I think I graduated from the backspin era, like getting down on the ball, to getting more lift, which was that. era of baseball. So yes, I was the launch angle at the very beginning of launch angle.
Nice. So you were drafted after your senior season.
Yes, I was a senior sign.
Okay. Okay. And so talk to me about that transition into Pro Bowl. What did that look like for you?
It was another big transition, just because much like moving from high school to college, now you're going from college, which is like a very established, routine. You have a lot of resources behind you. Same thing in professional ball, but very different. To being on your own, like this is your career. You're finally getting the opportunity to get to play professional baseball. But again, you're starting at ground zero. Like once you get drafted, you go into short season rookie ball, and the process starts all again, like the climb up, which is the most exciting part. But it's a big challenge. And now you're not only competing against great players from that state in Georgia or the country coming on the team. You're playing against people from all around, great high school players, great college players, great international players. So the pool of who you're competing against to rise up, increases, and also the level of play just skyrockets to, now you're facing, you know, every drafted pitcher from the best college teams every night, their bullpen, everyone's coming out throwing hard. The coaching style is different. The lifestyle is very
Mhm.
different. So it is, I would say, a much bigger or a very big transition from college to that, and taking a lot of personal responsibility for your career.
Mhm.
Whereas in college, we had a ton of resources, a strength coach, nutrition coach, you had your teammates around you, you had a great support system too. Like you really on your own, making your own career in baseball, which is the coolest thing ever. But it still is, a very big challenge that needs a different mindset and work ethic to achieve.
Yeah, it's a job at that point, right? And you hear the stories about minor league baseball. I know guys who've played in the minor leagues, riding the buses and not making a lot of
Hmm.
money and bouncing around. It's got to be hard,
It
on a
is.
day-to-day basis, especially if things aren't going your way.
Hmm. I think
Where did you Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing I failed to mention during my college years is that in the summertime I mentioned Virginia, but I also had 2 summers up in Cape Cod.
Mhm.
Um, so after my sophomore year, I played under Coach Schiffner for about 5 to 10 games on a temp contract. So I didn't play a lot of summer ball after my sophomore year, and then I went home, and that's when I started to work on my swing um,
Mhm.
with my dad, and my brother, going into my junior year, and then after my junior year, went back to Chatham and had, I think, an awesome summer. Both, statistically, I hit over 317. I was a Cape League All Star. So things were just clicking. Everything felt good at the plate, and that transitioned into senior year. Um, but Coach Schiff and like Chatham in general, a lot of great players have flowed through that program. That is where I test a lot of like being able to handle that transition, because they do treat you very much like a professional there, much like our college program. Um, so the Cape really prepared a lot of like the mental processes, along with Georgia Tech, to like handle that transition a little bit better. I think, in my opinion, that I just wanted to swing back to before we got on the professional route.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, right? Like just to be put in an environment that's more similar to the professional environment, just to have exposure to it
Hmm.
has to be a help, right?
Right.
And one thing I was thinking about, and this is kind of an indulgent question for me, but was the Cape League wood bat?
It was, yes.
Okay, can you talk to me about the transition from aluminum metal to wood bat? Because I started playing wood bat as an adult.
Uh huh.
And I swear by the fact that I feel like kids should play with wood because they have to learn how to hit the ball
Yeah.
square, barrel it up. When you miss hit the ball with wood, it's a totally different game, right? So
Right.
can you just talk about that transition? Because I'm curious as to what that was like for you.
Yeah. It's a great question, because high school, we did use wood bats in the summer league. That's a thing,
Hmm.
that we had. And then the wood bat from college, when I was playing college, it was the beginning of BB core, where the bats were
Mhm.
getting better, but it was still very different from what we were using in high school with the old BESR bats. If anyone, I know the kids these days don't know much about BESR, but it was like hitting with a Nerf bat
Right,
almost.
right. A
Very that's
weapon.
Yeah, exactly, which is why they definitely should have changed it. But yeah, the wood bat transition teaches you, like, I think, how to be a hitter, like a true baseball hitter, just because it's not as forgiving as the metal bat, of course. You really feel the ball hit the bat more than you do, of course, on metal, and it teaches you, your swing, your deficiencies, and opens you up. Of course, if you get jammed with a wood bat, like that thing's flying out of your hand. If you hit one off the end, like these are all things you can physically feel in your hand. Um, that you really have to hone in on your swing and get down to the nitty gritty of what's working and what's not, because it's a very finite space to hit a baseball in the barrel of a wood bat.
Yep. So we agree on this topic. I was just curious.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely
so,
do. I'm a wood bat
so
fanatic.
I'm a huge proponent, and
Hmm.
I love playing with wood bat because it was just a much truer game, and it
Hmm.
was a lot of fun to learn how to play. Like again, as an adult, like I feel like I learned how to play baseball at 25 playing with a
Yeah,
wood bat because it's a totally different baseball game, and that was
yeah.
fun. It was fun to learn, and that for me, like the opportunity to play. Once I got started playing again, it was like I'm having fun. It wasn't for money
Hmm.
or it wasn't for anything. It was just to play baseball, and I really dug that. And I think
Yeah.
that, it's something that a lot of players, they think their careers are over. And a lot of guys come back to baseball after and they love it. So
Right.
that kind of is off track, but I had to go down that road.
No,
Anyway,
I'm a baseball naturalist. So like if you're ever in a rut with baseball, you can't find joy in like hearing the fresh crack of a wood bat, or like a good pine tar on a wood bat is like heaven to me. I don't know what it is,
yep,
but the aesthetic, the smell, the feel, there's
totally.
nothing better.
Totally. So how long did you play professionally?
I played about 3 seasons, so two with the Twins, and my last year with the Brewers.
Okay. And ultimately how is that how is it to make the decision to move on from professional baseball?
It was difficult, it was a progression over time. With the Twins, I had about 2 good years, and then my third spring training, things just weren't really panning out. I wasn't hitting as well. I didn't get the opportunity to break camp, so I stayed in extended spring training, and then they eventually released me. So I had a whole nother, um, choice ahead of me. It's like I've ended 2.5 years. Not really how I wanted to end it with the Twins. I still had college, about 12 credits left to finish,
Mhm,
and graduate and get that done. But ultimately, the Brewers came back and called and gave me the opportunity to go up to their Double A team to catch bullpens, be kind of a reserve player in case anyone went down, and it didn't pan out. So at that point, I was ready for a transition. I felt like it was time to explore different realms, because minor league baseball is it's a grind. It's the best opportunity in the world, but you're playing
mhm,
140 games a day. You're riding those buses. You're making minimal money, trying to support yourself. So it is a challenge both during the
mhm,
season and in the off season to support yourself and live. Just because, as everybody will know, like life only gets more expensive when you leave home and
mhm,
have your own career. So all those decisions were coming in, which led to like pursuing the going back to school, still staying in shape in case an opportunity came up, but joining the professional realm.
So ultimately, I mean, the last stop didn't work out, but ultimately it was your choice sort of to move on.
Hmm. It was. I was in a I was in a good spot with the Brewers. They invited me back to camp, or I think they were gonna invite me back to camp, but it came down to my decision at the end of the day. Um, and at the time felt like it was a good transition point, but it is it was a different experience that um, I was expecting probably at the end of my career.
Yeah. So tell me about what you started to do professionally, or what you do professionally now that you're out of baseball.
Yeah, so it was that transition out of baseball, and it happens for everybody, no matter if it's,
Hmm.
after high school, after college, after professional. Everyone's going to have that moment in time where it's like, this is no longer part of my life.
Hmm.
Um, so it was, a big eye-opening experience. Like, what's next? Baseball has
Hmm.
literally been my life for the past 20 years, 18, 20 years. Um, and it was difficult. I won't lie. It was difficult to like find something that you're as in tune with, as you're passionate about. And I think that is the biggest challenge of college. It's like really honing into baseball, but also branching out and finding, passions and, academics and topics that I would recommend a lot of, parents and kids put emphasis on, not just on the baseball side. But I
Hmm.
wanted something, outside of sports. I wanted to challenge myself and find an industry. And I stumbled across, um, this company I'm working for now called Mark 43 and Glassdoor. It's a startup. A lot of their attributes that they were saying they held as a company um, were a lot of things that I held myself to as an athlete. And it was the opportunity to build, a company from the ground up and work on a team. So the mission oriented nature of work that I do is for public safety. So we work with first responders. So it's mission
Hmm.
critical, like high pressure software that we work with. So I found a job as a sales rep at that company because athletes naturally, we always get sales
Hmm.
opportunities. We're used to working with different people and adjusting, and of course have a good work ethic. Um, so I got a sales role, and since then, I did that for a couple of years and then transition to more of a consultative um, internal implementation role for our software. So a lot different from catching 95 in the heat in Florida to working behind a desk on a computer.
Yeah, but I think you're right though. The sales environment is very, not very, but is definitely analogous to sport, right? In the sense that it's very competitive, it's very performance driven, right? You kind of
Hmm.
motivate yourself and you sort of make your own way and find different ways to solve problems. Whereas, maybe a less, sort of a more traditional role where you're sort of like doing the work, so to
Right.
speak, tends to be a little bit more, not as maybe interesting or fun. But I think it's really cool that you're in the startup environment. I've always gravitated to that. I've worked with startups as a consultant, and I mean, I've got my own business where it's just me. But I think it is really cool to work in an environment where you're building something from the ground up, and
Hmm.
it's mission critical, right? Like you align with the mission versus just kind of showing up for a paycheck, which obviously money matters, like you said. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's great if you can work in a place where you believe in what you're doing.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, just a few more questions before we wrap up. Did you ever give any thought to staying in baseball, like after your career was over as a coach or in some capacity?
I did, and I stayed in it for a while after that. Like, while I accepted, or in that in between period, I was doing lessons. I was working camps. Of course, my brother has his teams over there in North Jersey, so I was helping out in those practices. And then once I got into the swing of things in the professional world, schedules change, travel goes up. So that took away a lot of the time during the week that I was going home, doing lessons at night. But I stayed in sports for probably about a year after I was playing,
Hmm.
and then
Okay.
as work got more busy, but now transitioning into a new role that I have more time, I do have that hunger to get back out there and find some local players to work with. But I think my brother takes a lot of that on between the two of us, thankfully.
Hmm.
Um, but I would like to personally. I'm going to. I know this role that I'm in, the company is probably the next 2 years. I will find my way back to baseball um, over time.
Yeah, and listen, as a father who coaches baseball, I would say that if it's ever in your plans to have children and you coach baseball as just a volunteer coach, it is by far one of the greatest things that you'll do.
Hmm.
I love it, especially because there's so many kids who, it's like, they just play baseball for fun. It's not a job. It's not, I want to play in high school or college. It's just like they show up to play, and teaching that
Hmm.
to kids who really, who are just there to learn is really a fun thing. So, I mean, I hope for it to come back into your life at some point, in some capacity, because it's really great. So, I guess looking back on all of it, right? Like specifically the college time, like what was the most challenging thing for you as a student athlete, right? That transition, but also just sort of managing that all those hats and that you wear as a student athlete at a high level.
Yeah, it's the challenge was it's really a full-time job. I think y- everyone hears it time and time again. There's a lot of high expectations of you. You're getting a great opportunity. And it's managing like the day to day and being consistent because you are waking up at 6 a.m. to go work out. You have an 8 a.m. Hour lecture that you have to go through. All the while, you have to mix in your own meals, find your way to get around, and then get to practice on time and make sure all your homework and all your schoolwork's
Hmm.
done. And then you're keeping in touch with friends, family, girlfriends at the time. So there is a lot in the melting pot that you're just not used to. So for me, it was consistency and getting a routine. That only comes with time and experience. Freshman year
Hmm.
is a lot different than my sophomore and senior year, where I was living in the dorms with roommates, like on your own for the
Hmm.
first time, versus over the years getting an apartment, getting a roommate. By the time I was a senior, I felt like I was, one of the older guys at 22 or 23. But I was much more prepared, I think, from my freshman year to my senior, like waking up in the morning, having meals prepped, having everything ready to go is something you just learn throughout, your freshman to senior year of how to manage like everything around you and your schedule and demands, but also just managing yourself. Because at the end of the day, like you have to be present. Time is going to go by very quick, and you have to control, everything in your own life and make it your own.
Yeah. So if you had to give one piece of advice to a student athlete, high school kid who's listening to this or their parents, like what would it be? Like what would your advice be about preparing for the transition from high school to college athletics?
Mine would be just do what excites you and you know, or trust the process because, and B, I think you have to be present. Everything from in high school, we're taught to think like, what's next? Where am I going? What am I doing? Kind of miss what's right in front of you and the opportunity at hand of like today's game, today's opportunity to play and um, enjoy the game just for the game itself. I think you mentioned that before. So I think that's the biggest thing is not losing sight of your why, of what you're doing and who you're doing it for and why, which, you can only get from experience and time. Um, for me, like, I think my brother definitely talked like we lost our father during my junior year of college. So like
Mhm.
that forced me to like look at why I was playing the game, for what reasons, and like brought me back down to earth from being, big Division 1, program, and those demands just like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I playing? So
Mhm.
to players and to parents, like look at the opportunity at hand and take advantage of it. Like you get 4 years to go to hopefully a great academic school. You're
Mhm.
around people. You're going to meet new friends, both on your team and outside. You're going to learn a lot of new things about yourself, open up new doors professionally, new relationships that are truly
Mhm.
going to last a lifetime. So when you look at your decision to go be a college baseball player, you're making a much bigger investment and decision for your life than anything else because it's 4 years, but it's 4 years that are going to kind of drive the course of where you're going in life that I don't think is thought of when you're 17 or 18. And I'm sure parents know this. I'm not a parent, but I'm sure it's in the back of their head. But it's a big decision that I think you need to really hold true to because sometimes it's not always the big school that's going to make you the happiest or it's going to give you the most fulfillment. Um, and I think I learned that in the professional world playing for the Twins and the Brewers. Like there was a pitcher on the Twins. He didn't play in college. He went to a liberal arts school and then started playing men's league softball and got a contract because someone found him in the men's league. and he's on the same field as that the catcher from Florida State, the pitcher from Vanderbilt, and the 18-year-old kid from the Dominican Republic who has been in the system for
Hmm.
3 years. So the opportunity, like, you don't have to be in one place to get the opportunity that you think you're going to
Hmm.
get. Like, trust the process, enjoy the game for what it is. If you play and you love it, results will come and opportunities will follow. So I think that's the biggest thing. Don't follow on where and what and this. Focus on why and get back to the roots.
That's great advice. And it's also a really nice way to end. So, AJ, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. This is great. I could talk about baseball with you, I'm sure, for hours if we could, but I don't
Especially
want to
with
keep you.
bats. Especially with
Exactly.
bats.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on and take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a great fourth.
You too. Thank you.